Which real-life serial killer disturbed you the most? William Bonin, aka the Freeway Killer, killed my childhood friend in 1980. He was 16. I was 15 at the time, and that is too young an age to wrap your head around having a friend a victim of a serial killer. It changed me. I am 55 years old now, and still when I think about it, it breaks my heart. His body was found in such a horrific manner. When you are 15 years old, you just can't fathom. But then life dishes some hard lessons and the realization of it is manageable. Just barely though. I was able to hear the news of Bonin execution by radio and breathed a sigh of relief, although I will never understand how Bonin found recruits to help in his killings. It's a sad story. Golden State Killer, and we now know as Joseph James DeAngelo. This guy would stalk his victims for weeks leading up to attacks, along with many other houses, while he was working as a police officer. When he attacked, he was relentless and would stay in the house for hours messing with his victims. When cornered, he would kill without a second thought. I think the craziest part to me about the GSK is that he would break into homes and leave shoestrings in hidden places in the house so he could quickly retrieve them to tie victims up when he came back for the attack. Imagine being one of those victims and slowly realizing not only the situation you're currently in, but also that this isn't the first time this masked man has been in your home. Dean Coral. I almost puked when reading about the methods of torture he used on little boys. He was such a douche that his teenage accomplice was the one that killed him, which revealed his 28+ murders to the public. There is a haunting photo of an unidentified victim that was found in his accomplice's property years after they got busted. Nobody has any clue who the kid is, but the image of distress on his face and the toolbox full of torture tools next to him have forever been burned into my mind. One of the saddest stories is one of the boys he picked up was 14 years old and on his way home from the gas station. He was saving up bottle caps for recycling money to take a girl to the movie, and he never made it home. Imagine how high on life that kid was. He must have worked so hard to get the money together to take a pretty girl he probably had a crush on for a long time to the movies. He must have been so happy on the walk home. But then he ended up dying a slow and painful death. BTK. Worked code enforcement, so plenty of access to homes, prominent church member, family man, depraved murderer. He was sort of a doddering duckwit in his day-to-day. Just somebody's dad, who was visibly odd but inoffensive. Not unpleasant but not bright. But behind the scenes he was an extremely dangerous man who would hide in a family's home for hours before sneaking out to bind, torture, and sloppily kill all of them. I saw an interview with one of the prosecutors. He said the scariest thing about Rader was when you look at him and talk with him after seeing what I've seen, you realize the Dennis Rader you're talking to is not the real Dennis Rader. The Railway Killer in the late 90s. He rode trains throughout North America, and many of his victims were in Texas, where I lived as a teenager. We had railroad tracks just behind our backyard, and we frequently saw people riding in open/empty cars. When it became apparent a serial killer was riding on trains in Texas, my parents got the house alarm fixed and then monitored, and my dad slept with a gun near his bed. Not sure if it's been said yet, but I'm going with Gary Ridgway, or the Green River Killer. Dude killed between 50 and 70 women, usually teen runaways or sex workers, by picking them up in his car, smooth-talking them, showing them pictures of his son to gain trust, having sex with them, and then strangling them with his bare hands and dumping them in the forest near Green River, just outside of Seattle. Normal-looking mid-30s family man who claimed murdering young women was his career and bragged about having the most confirmed kills of any American serial killer. Israel Keys, serial killer, necrophiliac. He was raised in a militant fundamentalist Christian household, joined the military, then came back to the U.S. and killed at least 11 people all over the country. He went to extraordinary lengths to not be caught by choosing victims at random, killing far from his home. He would hide kill kits and return years later when he was ready to kill someone in that area. It's terrifying how he killed a woman in Alaska, went on vacation with his family to some Caribbean island for a few days. Flew back to Alaska. Took the poor woman's body and sewed her eyes open and had her corpse pose with a newspaper that was a few days old to throw off law enforcement into thinking she was a runaway. Dismembered her. He then used her credit card in different states to show she was on the move. But that was what got him caught. The DC Snipers, John Allen Muhammad and John Lee Malvo. Not only were the killings completely random, people filling up with gas or walking in a parking lot, they started to move south and I was still living in my hometown, Charlottesville, Virginia, so there was the fear they could make it that far south. Mr. Cruel, unsolved. He is an Australian serial assaulter who abducted and sexually assaulted 3 girls and is the prime suspect of the abduction and murder of another young girl. After sexually assaulting his victims, he bathed them carefully to get rid of evidence. One victim described it as like a mother washing a baby. In one case, he took a second set of clothes from the girl's home to dress her before he let her go. He just stopped. And that's the uneasy part. Not knowing how or why or if he will start doing it again. Most people believe that Carmaine Chan's death was what stopped him. The public and police attention increased when she wasn't released, and when they found her body, and it's possible that she fought him, which led to him killing her. Considering that none of the other victims were killed, perhaps doing that spooked him so much be stopped. This is the crime I really wish would be solved. The Toy Box Killer transcripts come to mind. If you absolutely want to have your day ruined, this has to be one of the most disturbing, creepiest things ever. David Parker Ray would play these tapes for his victims, so they had an idea of what was coming and to also mentally break them. Hear the start of one tape to give you an idea. Hello there, bitch. Are you comfortable right now? I doubt it. Wrists and ankles chained. Gagged. Probably blindfolded. You are disoriented and scared, too, I would imagine. Perfectly normal, under the circumstances. For a little while, at least, you need to get your shit together and listen to this tape. It is very relevant to your situation. I'm going to tell you, in detail, why you have been kidnapped, what's going to happen to you and how long you'll be here. I don't know the details of your capture, because this tape is being created July 23, 1993 as a general advisory tape for future female captives. I just recently learned about Nathaniel Bar Jonah. Easily the most disturbing criminal I've read about. Today's modern-day Albert Fish. Bar Jonah's interest in crime began when he attempted to strangle another child when he was only 7 years old. Eventually the sickness in his mind evolved so far that he would impersonate police officers in order to abduct, sexually harass, or sometimes kill his child victims. He was caught and released by police multiple times and eventually deemed not a credible threat to society. He later moved across the country and began cannibalizing children. It is likely that he fed bits of children to his friends and neighbors during cookouts. Absolutely horrifying case. Ted Bundy. There are separate accounts of him transforming himself, noticeably changing in front of a jail official and a relative at a bus station, to the point he smelled and felt different to them. He spoke of the entity within himself and he was really good at changing his appearance and evading capture. I remember watching a documentary on Bundy and they mentioned that he had the type of face that could look very different depending on what kind of beard, haircut he had or how much weight he had gained, lost. They showed a collection of different pictures of him and it was uncanny. The guy was like a chameleon. It blew my mind that they were all pictures of the same guy. Albert Fish. Guy killed and ate people and would write about how good it tasted. He liked kids in particular. He actually kidnapped a little girl and wrote a letter to her mother afterwards. He described how he sectioned off her parts and the cooking method and even what the individual parts tasted like. A real sick bastard who also self-mutilated by pushing needles into a space between his testicles and anus. When they took x-rays of that area he had like 15 plus needles just sitting in there. Horrible monster of a man to the end. H. Holmes. Closest thing to the Saw movies in real life. The guy built a hotel with hidden rooms, secret passageways, torture chambers, chutes leading to a giant vat of acid, gas chambers, crematorium, etc. It's one thing to randomly kill people, but a willingness to put in that much time, money, and effort to torture people and dispose of the bodies is just another level of disturbing. There's recently been a series in the UK on serial killer Dennis Day Nielsen. A Scottish killer who lived in London, and prowled bars and streets for young men to entice back to his flat. He killed many people, and was caught after a plumber found human bones and a mass of flesh in the drains. Turned out Day was dismembering his victims, and trying to flush the remains. In his previous flat he would burn and bury the remains, but his second flat was top floor of a 3-story building, so resorted to flushing. The police found the remains of 3 men in bin bags and a wardrobe, as well as under a drawer in the bathroom, and a head in a large cooking pot on the stove. One killing which stood out for me was a young guy Dave found outside his property one day who was unwell. He helped the guy get to the hospital for treatment. Days later, The young man went back to thank Dave for saving his life, stayed for a drink, and Dave drugged, strangled, and dismembered him. This reminded me of Jeffrey Dahmer and the lad who escaped his flat to the police, who then delivered him back to Dahmer's flat. People in the world astound me. There will never be peace whilst people like this exist. Thanks for tuning in to Reddit Streams. Hit the subscribe button and the notification bell for more videos. Share your views in the comments below.